Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our free webinar Safety Leadership Series. Today, we're going to be talking about being a safety professional. A couple housekeeping items. We do have a website Nalani put in the chat box that 24 hours after today's webinar, we'll be posting a recording, and it also has some additional resources for you to download and be able to use. So make sure you check out the chat box in order to get that website link. It's a hidden link on our webpage. I'm going to go ahead and hide my video. I just wanted to say hello to everybody, and we'll go ahead and get started here. Okay, first, can I just get a indication on the chat? Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. And we are going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to the Being a Safety Professional webinar. This webinar is a continuing portion of our free series, which is really the whole purpose of this is to help us achieve our vision statement for our organization, our 2030 vision, which is to reach every business in the state of Hawaii to help make a positive impact on them, to help make Hawaii safer and more prosperous for everyone. So we've just picked a series of topics that we think are interesting and hopefully impactful and help create new thoughts. I talk about this every time we do training, that whenever you come to a class, it's really important to challenge your old thoughts and your old beliefs, and I challenge you to listen to disprove what you thought instead of only listening to reinforce what you already knew. Right? That's how we expand, that's how we grow, that's how we get new information and really improve our our thought processes. So we'll go ahead and keep going from there, but just challenge you, disprove what you think you already knew with what we talk about today. So really quick introduction, I'm Tracy Lawson. I'm the owner and president of Lawson Associates. I've been doing safety and health for about 30 years. I've got a bunch of certifications and a degree, but most importantly, I really pride myself on working out in the field of safety and health every day, trying to help solve problems and really working to create a culture in our industries where safety is a valued tool, a part of a management system, and integrated with all other parts of our business so that it can actually help us be more effective and more efficient instead of, well, the opposite of that. Here's what we're going to go through today. I've selected the ANSI Z590.2 standard to just give you an overview of the scope and functions of the safety professional position from a big picture academic perspective, if you will. What are the elements that are required for a safety professional? We're also going to go through the Board of Certified Safety Professionals Code of Ethics. Very important. The decisions we make every day are about life and health, and it's important that we understand these are ethical decisions. And then we're going to review some of the different options for career path, career growth related to certifications, and belonging, and encourage you to belong to some safety professional organizations. One of the registrants asked if this webinar is eligible for continuing education points. We're actually in the process of getting our ISET certification to be able to issue IACET CEUs. So not yet, but I would definitely keep track of your training time, because depending on your group, they may allow you to use it regardless, okay? But very soon we'll have that certification. Okay, so let's talk about our objectives for today. And at the conclusion of this course, you'll be able to compare the functions of the safety professional in your own organization or in your position with a nationally recognized standard. And that's nice to have a baseline to be able to compare to. You'll be able to establish a safety intelligence approach to culture. And that's a term that we've trademarked here in our company, and I'll explain that more. And this is for the professional. We want to be seen as professionals. And I have a saying, and hopefully it's not offensive to anyone, but we don't want to be out there being placeholders, just filling a position. We want to be out there and be safety professionals, accomplishing our mission, accomplishing our duty and our goals, and contributing to our organizations in a positive way, and contributing to the life, safety, and health of the workforce. Human capital sustainability is something that I'll talk about as well. And it's really our goal and our mission is to enhance and preserve human capital sustainability. We'll talk about the Code of Ethics, like I said earlier. If you are a certificate holder through the Board of Certified Safety Professionals, this is mandatory. I think this should be something everyone strives to and adheres to if you work in the safety field to begin with. And then you'll be able to recognize the value of belonging to a professional organization. So let's talk about the ANSI standard. By the way, ANSI standards are current, up-to-date best practices. Sometimes they're incorporated by reference and regulations, like if you do military work, the EM 385, if it incorporates the standard, the most current version of that standard in EM 385 becomes regulation. For OSHA, it's usually the version of the regulation that has been incorporated. So important to tap into these documents. They are a wealth of resource and information. And this is really the baseline where we should be starting to determine what's the scope and function we should be performing. And this standard is, like I said, it highlights those positions as advisory roles and that require technical expertise. And so we should have expertise in loss prevention, risk management, if you will, an understanding of the legislative and regulatory requirements and processes, and then again, ethics, that word's going to keep popping up here today. So interesting to highlight that this is a safety professional role, is an advisory role. That's the first thing. If I could encourage everybody on our website, we have our safety pivot on there, and we always encourage you at the end of each class to jot down 3 things you learned and 3 action items that you're going to take from our classes, because that's the whole purpose, is to expand our knowledge, but also change our behavior and actions, pivot in a new course of direction. And so one of the first things is to sit back and say, how is our role perceived in our organization? And in comparison to the ANSI standard and the ultimate goal for how we should be interacting within a safety management system. And because it's often easier, and because safety professionals, I guess traditionally the role has kind of morphed where the safety person does the safety things and the supervisor and the manager does the supervisory and management things. And it's really difficult to separate the two. In fact, it's non-productive to separate the two. All roles should be doing management, supervisory, and safety roles, if that makes sense to everyone. And the safety professional is there to have an extra level of technical expertise in the same way you would have an electrical engineer or a structural engineer or a superintendent who specializes in precast. You get the idea. We all have our specialties, but we all have the role and responsibility to carry out the implementation of our company's business in safe, effective, efficient manners, okay? So this standard is a good baseline for us. So we're gonna give a high-level overview of this today. So this is the Z590 standard, and this is provided, basically the standards provided to help the safety professional understand how to serve their organization, and it helps the organization to understand how to best utilize us within our role, how to get the best value, or I would say high leverage outcomes from our knowledge, from our interactions with the management team. And that means we're going to capture the best value possible. And then it's important to help recognize that this safety professional position is not all encompassing. We cannot be all things to all people at all times. And I want to give just an example of this. It is common in organizations to designate the safety manager, safety officer, safety professional, whatever term you use, as the competent person for fall protection, scaffolds, confined space, you name it, all the work that's being done. Your safety person's that person for everyone. Well, that does a disservice. Number one, that safety professional cannot be all places at all times overseeing the crews. In many cases, they don't have the authority to carry out that responsibility per each crew. And it's really a disservice to the supervisor and manager who is relying on that safety professional to not give them the same level of knowledge and authority and expectation for filling their job, right? If I was a heavy equipment operator, I would be expected to know all aspects of my job and my equipment and be responsible for everything. I wouldn't take just the safety piece out of that and make that somebody else's job. I'm going to make the equipment operator responsible for all aspects of their work. The same way a supervisor is responsible for all aspects of their work, and the safety manager is the specialist who acts in an advisory role and helps supplement and enhance and add value to that supervisor's role, okay? So there's really a great need for specialties and for expertise. I think I got some really great advice when I first started in safety many years ago. And that was that for me to really find a niche. And so I started off, at the time I worked for my family's company. We were a contractor, and we did a lot of painting, plastering, drywall, taping, and we used a lot of scaffolding. And so I said, okay, well, I don't know a lot about scaffolds. This seems to be a very important part of our company's business. I'm going to go learn everything I can about that. And pretty soon, that was a good niche for me, but I didn't stay still there. Then I said, well, wow, cranes and rigging really seem to be a big part of construction. One of the most important aspects, moving materials. It could be the most devastating. I'm gonna go learn everything I can about that. And so I went and learned everything about that. So this specialties or expertise within the safety professional function is really an important challenge for you. You can be a general practitioner. Everybody should be a general practitioner and know about the standard requirements for all subjects for your industry. But then I challenge you to go find a niche, find something that scares you and you don't know a lot about, and go really dig into it and overcome that and be an expert in that area, and keep moving and progressing. So we have to individually challenge ourselves for that too. So this is the Z590.2. It's a 2003 standard, but it's funny, it's the 2012 revision. And we see this Plan, Do, Check, Act all the time. The basis for this comes from the ANSI Z10 standard in occupational health and safety management systems. This actually is not a linear process as it appears on the screen. It doesn't have to go in sequence, Plan, Do, Check, Act. It makes sense if it does, but plan might interact with check and do might interact with act. And so it's dynamic in that they can touch all parts and pieces. You notice all corners or all tips of this pie are touching each other. And so it's a dynamic process, okay? But just looking at it from a simple view today, Plan, Do, Check, Act. Part of our responsibilities is to apply this concept in a safety management system. And let me talk about that for a second. There's a big difference between implementing elements of a program or policy versus implementing a safety management system that integrates those programs, procedures, policies with the workplace management system. If we operate in a silo or in a vacuum with our safety program, and that's kind of what I was alluding to on the previous slide with the safety position in itself, that, well, safety does safety and we all do the rest of the job. That's a very slippery slope, okay? Just the same way as if we're implementing safety programs, safety policies or practices, and they're not part of a management system, which means we're evaluating, checking every change we make impacts one other element of our business, whether it's a positive change or a negative change, and how we implement the pieces of our safety and health elements to interact with all the other core elements of a business, whether it be procurement, human resources, whether it be project estimating, whether it be project management and how we kick the job off, how we make changes, how we plan our work. All these pieces have to touch together in order to get high leverage outcomes. Otherwise, you know, if we don't recognize the factors of how one area affects another, regardless of our intent, we could be putting resources, time, effort, and really working diligently to put a good program in place, but it will result in low leverage outcomes, right? Versus if we actually step back and look at how we as a safety professional implement this program within how our company does business, the way we work as it's actually performed, we're going to get better leverage outcomes for those efforts and those programs and those procedures, okay? So as we do plan, do, check, act, the plan portion is pretty obvious, and we're required to prevent and detect, right? Anticipate. We're to provide a workplace that's free from recognized and predictable hazards according to the Occupational Safety and Health Act, and even to the Hawaii Revised Statute, the 396, our own state of Hawaii Safety and Health Act, okay? So anticipating, identifying, and evaluating hazardous conditions and practices. What is the work that we're going to do? How do we imagine or plan that it should be done, with input from the workers and the crew who are actually going to do it, and they tell us what they're really going to do, not what they think we want to hear. And then we work together to come up with a good plan, and then we monitor for work is done. And when we're planning for these things, we need to take into consideration a term that's called human organizational performance, or HOP. We have to understand that there are a lot of elements and variabilities into what affects performance in the field, right? That could be schedule, that could be weaknesses in our system, that could be changes in procedure or work situations or risk, unplanned disruptions. The workplace is constantly changing. So this plan portion, this anticipate, identify, and evaluate is continuous, but it has to be real. One of the biggest problems we have in the safety industry, I think, is that we have this, I call it illusions of grandeur, but we have this novel idea of perfect, no incidents, how things should be done, but work doesn't occur in that vacuum. So we have to look at what is the reality of how work's being done, and how we can then take away as many of these elements that cause workers to make different choices in the field outside of what we want in our plan and process, and in order for us to get the best results possible, okay, and be successful. And so the next thing besides plan is when we plan that work with all those considerations, we go out and we do the work. And so we take a look at what are our defenses in essence, what are our hazard controls, how are we going to design those, what are the methods, mean and method that we're going to integrate those with, what are the procedures and programs we're going to integrate that with. And then we're going to go check. We planned the work, we're doing the work according to the plan, and we're going to check, are we doing what we said we would do? We're going to measure and audit and evaluate the effectiveness of these controls and programs. And that's really a good check and balance for us to say, are we taking into account constantly changing dynamic factors that occur in the field? And I want to take this one opportunity to step back and say, what are we measuring? What is the goal and the outcome that we want? Because I think sometimes we will say things like 0 accidents. Well, what does 0 accidents look like, and how do we describe that to the workers? Or what is a good safety program? What is success? And I think a lot of us operate in an area that I'm going to call is an error. Our definition of a good safety and health result is 0 accidents. And a lot of organizations say, well, if I have 0 accidents this year, nobody reported anything, I had no lost time, you have to ask yourself, number one, is that accurate? And number two, your past performance is not an indicator of future results. So how did you achieve that 0 accidents if in fact you really did? And those are the things that we want to repeat and measure. Those are leading indicators, right? Well, I conducted quality training. I followed up from my training with my workers in my field. In the field, I focused on the competent person level of responsibility and interaction, and really getting them involved in the program. These are the things that equal good reduction of risk in the field, okay? So a good safety program isn't just 0 citations and 0 lost time accidents, okay? And so challenging you on your check element here on what are you measuring, And is it really a predictor of future performance? And I would say your accident statistics absolutely are not a predictor of future performance. It's the processes that we follow to achieve those results, okay? I've seen a lot of really great companies out there with very good safety processes and programs have an accident. And I've seen a lot of really opposite companies who didn't have what they needed and weren't being proactive and responsible with their programs, and I've seen them say that they had zero. So that in itself is a bit of evidence that, you know, using your statistics as successful indicators is not, lagging indicators is not effective, okay? So we plan, we do, we check, and then we act. And the act part is where we implement, we administer and advise others on hazard controls and hazard control programs. So as a safety professional, this is our plan, do, check, act, okay? So let's drill those down a little bit further here. So in anticipate, identify, and evaluate, that's one of the key core competencies or activities that we're to perform. What are some of the things that we look at in order to do that? And one thing could be historical data. This could be trends, not just accident rates and statistics, but trends that maybe I look at prior, the last month's inspection results. And what's the trend and data that it's showing me where we're having issues. I also want to look at things that are working well and figure out why is this area working well and what can we do to model and recreate that in areas that aren't doing as well. We were providing oversight on a project, and one particular crew for almost the whole duration of the contract had very few safety deficiencies during our observations and had no incidents, and were really doing well with their production. And we decided, we're like, what is different about this crew? Some of it was the leadership, okay? The folks who were in charge, they were very good at their competent person role. They were very good at planning and communicating, and the crew just loved to work for them. They felt taken care of. And you know, they were doing very good on their responsibilities and being proactive. And so we said, okay, let's pull these pieces out and let's talk about it and celebrate it and replicate that in as many other areas as we possibly can. And that's really a good positive way that there's such good rich data and sources of information to help us anticipate, identify, and evaluate when we look at not just what's not working. We tend to do that in safety, but let's look at what's really working well and pour into that, okay? We don't want to just take away pieces that we think aren't working and replace them with something else because we don't know how that's going to work. Let's find pieces that are working and go fill those pieces in areas that aren't working, okay? We want to look at existing or predictable issues in the future. And so that means we have to have a pretty good knowledge of how the work is being performed, how it should be performed, what can be done differently, and really be working with supervision and subject matter experts in drilling down to be able to predict these future losses, right? We want to look at probability and severity of loss, real or potential. We know that we have a lot of theories out there that say the more frequently something occurs, the more probability we have in it becoming more severe. And so we want to take a look and say, what are the, again, trends that we're having in the field just from observations? Let's not ignore these behaviors or conditions that we're coming across. If we're having a lot of issues with housekeeping, why? And what can we do to prevent that? Because the predictable future event and the probability and severity of that loss event is real. And it can be, you know, the same condition today could cause nothing, and the same condition tomorrow, if unchecked and uncorrected, could be extremely serious. And so we can't ignore issues or non-conformances in the field just because they haven't resulted in someone getting hurt, which is personally validating that, oh, yep, we should have followed that rule. Okay, so being aware of that. Conducting hazard analysis, using this information that we gathered, we actually, when we put together our hazard analysis and our research, we put together these hazard analysis based on research, excuse me, and we go back and we say, do I know everything about what the manufacturer says about using this tool? Have I actually read the safety data sheet? Have I actually read the specification that applies to this scope of work? And have I actually spoken to the people who are going to be performing this work and involve them in the process of establishing what our work steps and what our work methods are in order for me to properly go back and do an analysis and make sure all the safety elements are included in that process? Okay, that's really what a hazard analysis is for. Not just for a quick paperwork, check the box, good, I turned it in and we reviewed it and I never use it again, okay? As safety professionals, we should be reviewing systems for operationals, failure modes, causes, and effects. And in fact, that's actually a type of analysis that can be done. But we want to look at everything as a system. And, you know, if I were to take a car and take all the pieces of the car apart and put them into individual parts, they are no longer a car, right? I inspect, let's say, the brake, and I inspect the steering wheel and drive shaft, and I inspect the axle, all the pieces. Wow, that's great. But when I put the car back together, just because the individual pieces were good when I inspected them doesn't mean that they are then going to work well as a system. And a system is where all the individual parts and pieces work well together. And that's why we talk about safety management systems. So in the same sense, am I looking at all the different parts of my safety program and my work processes, whether it's my training program, whether it's my hazard communication process from procurement all the way through in the field, through training, through the use of the materials? Am I looking at all the parts and pieces of safety and how it integrates, and is it working well, and looking for the failure modes, causes, and effects, okay, and trying to identify that ahead of time. And then interpreting and analyzing data, looking for causes, looking for trends, and looking for relationships. And that's not just accident data. That's a lagging indicator. What are the leading indicators? What are the results of my inspections? What are the results of my, like I said, pre-accident investigations, looking at things before something goes wrong? How effective is my training when I go out in the field? Am I seeing trends that people are actually applying what they learned? Or if I'm seeing trends, am I even going back to my training department and saying, I am consistently seeing an issue with the wrong rebar caps or form stake caps being used, and can I get some training aids developed for that? So then the next piece is to look at ensuring the completeness and accuracy and validity of information that's being provided. That's important. Going back and making sure you know the full picture before you make a determination in something. Initiating investigations, and I mentioned a minute ago pre-accident investigations. There's a really good book. I'll have Nalani write it in the chat box for everybody, but I've really been reading a lot and doing a lot of training and digging into this human organizational performance, using learning teams and safety management systems. In fact, I've been really going in that direction for several years, okay? But there's an author named Todd Conklin who has put together a book called Pre-Accident Investigations, Better Questions, and it's an applied approach to operational learning. Great read if you want to really challenge your thought process and how you're looking at you know, learning and trending and growing within your organization. So I encourage you guys to get in there and look at more information. So we're also, so initiating investigations or pre-accident investigations was my point of sharing that book. What is working well, what is not working and why, and how can we pour into the system with things that we know will be good solutions. Providing and advising and counseling for compliance. And this, I call this coaching, to be honest. This is a biggest part of our job. Instead of being out there being safety cops, wouldn't we all love to get out of that role? Nobody wants to be in it. And I often tell supervisors, well, you know, you run this crew, not me. This is your team. Let me coach you on what the issue is and you address it, right? Not because I'm afraid of conflict. Anybody who knows me knows I'm not, but that's not the right place. I'm not the right person in position to be disciplining your crew, right? This is your team. and let me advise you and counsel you on what the law says and the pros and cons and the consequences and benefits, and then let's make a decision together moving forward. Okay. Conducting research. I just mentioned a minute ago that I was reading this book, or I'm been looking into and really focusing on safety management systems over the past few years. And I kind of alluded to this at the beginning when I said, hey, listen to disprove what you think you already know. So conducting research is a way for us to learn more based on facts or theories that exist out there that are sound theories within our industry, and to dive in. I think that if you're the safety professional in your organization, we have a responsibility to know the subject matter deeper. If I know the same amount of information that the foreman and the superintendent or the project manager or the manager in my company knows, what value is that adding, and what different perspective or different innovations or strategies can come from everybody having the same knowledge and groupthink? Okay, so our job is to do research and be finding new innovations, new equipment, new methods, new thought processes, new training techniques. Okay, assessing environments, tasks, and other elements to ensure capacities and limits of people are not exceeded. So that goes back to also matching up with human resources. Do we know roles and responsibilities? And have we identified the right people for the right role and position? Okay. Hazard control, in this element, this is where we're formulating and prescribing engineering or administrative controls, and that goes back to the hierarchy of controls, which as a safety professional is fundamental in how you are supposed to be interpreting and making decisions, interpreting hazards and making decisions. So engineering controls and administrative controls are well in advance of personal protective equipment, right? So are you familiar with what engineering control should be used? I just had a discussion this morning with another safety professional talking about the respirable crystalline silica standard. And the discussion started off with talking about, well, the worker was outside and they're using table 1, so they don't have to wear a respirator because they're chipping concrete, and it's less than 4 hours. And I said, yes, but you're missing the key factor that's required in table 1, which is the engineering control. And that's the administration of an integrated water control system, or the use of a shrouded tool with a HEPA vacuum system, right? Those are engineering controls. So as a safety professional, I need to be able to know what those are and recognize those and carry them out in the right order of precedence. Developing methods to integrate safety performance into the organizational and management systems and processes and operations. This is huge. This is that safety management system. But this is also looking at, I'm going to say, our competent persons and using that as a methodology, and looking back and stepping back at looking at your organization and saying, what are our core processes that we have in this business? I mentioned a couple of them earlier. It could be marketing, it could be procurement, it could be accounting, human resources, our product development, our product performance, and how we handle that, issuing that out, right? There's, most companies have 10 core key processes. And how does your safety program, I'll call it right now, how does your safety program integrate and interface with each of those? Are those people aware of it? Are you aware of it? And what's your strategy to integrate safety into those elements, okay? And then, so that's your policies and procedures for integration into operations. Have you mapped those out? And really you understand the workflow and how your company does business. I think one of the biggest things we see with organizations who are struggling with the safety program is that they haven't matched up the program to how the company does business. And really, there's a simple way to do that, is to go out and perform what's called a gap analysis. And that gap analysis is comparing how we want or believe work should be done versus the reality of how it's being done, and then determining, well, why is there a gap and what's the difference, and how can we work our system within the norms of the culture of how this company does their job, right? That's what makes us unique and different, how we do our business, our culture. So really important to develop your policies and procedures to integrate into your operational management system. Integrate your safety management system into your operational management system. Our other role under hazard controls is to consult and advise in planning, designing, systems development, and operations to maximize, I call it safe production, okay? And so I remember one of the things I thought was super innovative a really long time ago, working in an organization, was I actually got to give input in the estimating process, and even got the opportunity to review contracts to say, are there any safety issues that could pop up here that that I see that could be an issue for the entire organization, right? And we actually have a free course coming up in a couple weeks on estimating safety that we're going to talk about. What are the things our estimating department should do or could do to integrate with safety, capture some of these issues at the estimating stage, and to help us avoid unnecessary loss, right? So the next element under hazard control are advising and assisting human resources when applying hazard analysis results or dealing with capabilities and limitations of personnel. And some of this starts to interface with maybe the American with Disabilities Act or EEOC laws and requirements. We have to be really careful what information we ask and share, but we should be, as the safety professional, working closely with human resources to say that, you know, here's some of the roles and responsibilities of this position, and you know, how can we apply, these are the hazards that they could be exposed to. I'm going to go so far as to even say these are the learning objectives or core competencies this position should have to be able to work safely, and really interfacing at the point where we're hiring people or where we're evaluating some of the tradespersons when we have a bargaining agreement, collective bargaining agreement, and even working with those organizations to say, here's some trends and you know, some learning elements that maybe they could help implement into their programs for training, for apprenticeships, or when we receive someone from those programs, knowing that we have typical trends that go with that particular trade or position, and what is our strategy to counter that. We can't always just say, oh, well, we have no control over that. That's not acceptable. What innovative way can we move the needle in a different direction to counter some of the negative trends that could exist, okay? And then, very important, we need to stay current with technology, laws, regulations, standards, codes, products, methods, practices, everything else related to hazard control. We've got to know what's available out there, how it can be used, what the use and limitations are, so that we can actually make good recommendations and good evaluation of our defenses, right? Our hazard controls that our company could use, or our project, or our crew, or our teams, however you want to break it up. Okay, so staying current. I heard this saying a long time ago, I think it was in the Army when I first heard it, and they said, leaders are readers, you know, and I thought, oh, I want to be a leader. So what does that mean? So it means we're constantly looking, learning, researching, understanding. I just had a meeting with a group this morning talking about some of the COVID things and helping give them some assistance in how they're going to prepare to reopen their business. And I said, you know, we've been doing some free outreaches on COVID training, which, by the way, you can get on our website on our COVID tab, and keeping our website up to date. But I said, you know, before I send you over any more information, I'm going to go back and see if anything's changed since yesterday, because it's such a rapidly evolving issue. And it's almost the same way with other subjects, really, safety and health. It doesn't matter what's new out there. What are the other standards besides just the OSHA regulation? What are the letters of interpretation, and how do those apply? What are the ANSI standards? What are some white paper and research, and what are some things that some technical groups or other subject matter experts are talking about that could add different perspective or a different opportunity for me to deal with this issue or trend in a different way, okay? Or maybe even reinforce that, yep, you're on track and you're doing things right. So implement, administer, and advise. This particular portion of the standard requires that we prepare reports that communicate, and this is important, valid and comprehensive recommendations that are based on analysis and interpretation of data. So number one, we've got to be able to communicate. in written form, and our communication points and our analysis and interpretation of the data needs to be comprehensive, and it needs to be valid. One of the things I learned from Nalani a long time ago, she said, is I need to provide proof points. If I have an opinion for something, what's the proof of that point? How, back it up, right? I should be able to pull out a report. I should be able to point to a regulation, a legal interpretation from case law. I should be able to go back and say, well, I've come to my own conclusion based on this, this, and that. So if you're preparing reports and you want something done to address a trend, or you're making a recommendation to do something, don't just say, well, I recommend X. You know, think about it from the person who's receiving this report. Think about it from their perspective. What encourages them to want to listen to you? If I just said, well, I just think that's how it should be, I mean, I'm probably not going to get the support that I want, and then I'm frustrated and disappointed. Instead of me preparing my report in a way that communicates valid, comprehensive recommendations that address all issues within the system of the organization, and I can show the pros and cons and that the benefits outweigh the negatives, or I could even show a return on investment, right? What have I analyzed? What have I done my homework and research on? And am I interpreting the data the right way and communicating that the right way? The other thing is using written and graphic materials. So this could be making presentations or other communications to recommend, here's the hazard controls we want to put in place, or here's a policy or procedure. And I want to say this, you know, all too often, and I found this throughout my whole career too, and I'm trying so hard to pivot or shift this direction, is that, you know, I would just be the one, I'm the safety manager or vice president or director, whatever your title is, and I think we need this new policy. So here's your new policy, everybody follow it, okay? And so how I presented that, the research that I did to validate that, and even involving and looking at how is my policy gonna affect other parts and pieces of this organization? What's the impact? And am I going to get good high leverage outcomes? Have I involved everyone? Have I taken into consideration the concerns that the operations team would have, or the concerns that finance might have, or the concerns that human resources might have? No, I just did it because I'm in a vacuum. We need this policy, and so here you go, here's how you're going to do it. It's really important that if you're putting out these hazard controls and policies and procedures, that you involve the decision-making personnel. I call it key influencers. Do it in a learning team type environment and have everybody's buy-in and input, and, you know, understand that there may be some regulatory things you can't bend on, but listen and address the concerns and the feedback that you're getting from the group, because all those things that you do will improve your ability for this policy and procedure to be successful. And that's ultimately what we want, right? So the other elements that we do, we direct or assist in planning and developing educational and training in hazard recognition and control. And gosh, I could talk about this one bullet point all day. Don't worry, I won't. But we have a free class also on how to develop and manage and implement a training program. And so important. It starts off, there's structure to this, there's thought behind it, there's adult learning principles behind it. And I think that, you know, a lot of us give good effort, but we could be a little more strategic in how we're putting these programs out, the way we involve all the different learning styles, the follow up to that. I've talked about Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve almost every class I give. You know, 5 key follow-up touches after a learning event will take your retention from 10% to 90% if we do it right. And there's a whole study on that, okay? But if we're gonna be involved in the educational training elements of hazard recognition and control, those are safety classes in a simple way to coin it, then we should be using effective and efficient methods to train and communicate. And that's our responsibility as a professional, okay? So just because you're a safety person doesn't mean you're a good trainer, doesn't mean you know, by osmosis, understand how training should be put together. We need to go out and research, and that's why this is one of the key educational and position requirements, because training is so critical to the performance and the results, performance of safety and health and the expectant results that we want to achieve, okay? And then you'll either conduct or assist with conducting these courses, depending on, you know, your makeup. You may not like to do training, you may not be built for that, but you could be really good about putting together the presentation on the technical side of it. Or you could, you know, help facilitate the training and have supervision, appropriate supervision, do the teaching, and you're supporting them. So that could go in a lot of different directions on that one. So we're also advising others about hazards and hazard controls, and this could be when we're communicating with the media or the community or the public. How do you explain to the public, let's say you're doing a roadway job, how do you explain to them in a way that's effective on how important it is for them to stay out of our work zones, but also to be assured that the work that's taking place is safe and done in a manner that's safe for them, right? And how do you take and communicate in clear, concise manner, there's been a crisis? What are you doing to control that crisis and how you're handling it, right? So you may be advising others on who are going to be your spokesperson or others who are speaking to the media. I also add to this one, within your safety management system, it's so important that safety interface with marketing. I can't tell you how many times, in fact, I just recently looked at a website for a really great company, but what they had on their website I counted at least 7 safety violations on one page. And so I just, being who I am, I just said, well, hey, I wanted to point out some things that I saw on your website. It's a great web page, by the way. I think your company is awesome. And maybe this isn't reflecting the message and sending the message you are thinking about. And so how is your company in their public involvement and their marketing materials, making sure that your pictures accurately represent what you say your commitments are, right? If I have this website talking about how we're safe and we do all these things, but I have safety violations on every picture, then that's probably not going to match up well, right? And then the next bullet point here is managing and implementing hazard controls and programs within the skill set of the safety professional. And so stay in your sandbox. Every safety professional is not a competent or qualified person in every subject, and it grows and changes as we grow and change and develop. So know your limitations and be staying and using the controls and the programs that are within that skill set. For example, if we're going to be doing an asbestos abatement on our project, you know I've been certified as an asbestos building inspector. I have a certain level of knowledge, but I am not a certified industrial hygienist. So I'm going to stay within my skill set and my knowledge level of that subject matter. Now, I might say, I want to know what the industrial hygienist knows about this, and then I'm going to go out and I'm going to increase my skill set and my knowledge base and make sure that I truly have a good handle on it before I start operating within that area. Okay, it doesn't even have to be something so, you know, technical as asbestos. It could be respiratory protection, which is also technical. It could be scaffolds. It could be electrical. It could be trenching and excavation. If you don't know, don't give direction. Go out and find out and know, or find someone who does know. I can't emphasize this enough. Stay within your skill set. Stay within your sandbox. The next skill set area is the measure, audit, and evaluate. And so for this, we're establishing and implementing techniques that involve risk analysis, cost benefit analysis, work sampling. We may be looking at different rates or ratios and looking at the effectiveness of systems or hazard control processes or program effectiveness. So what is it that you want to achieve? How will you know you got there? And how will you measure it and report on it, right? Your company could be reporting in cost per man hour. They could say, let's go out and do behavioral observations before training on fall protection. And then let's go back and do behavioral observations 1 day, 1 week, 30 days, and 60 days after fall protection training for that same group of people. And do we have a measurable, demonstrable change in behavior, right? Are our processes working? Or are we training on the right things, and how are you going to evaluate that and show the effectiveness of that? So as a safety person, professional, you should understand return on investment. You should understand the same measurements and criteria that all other aspects of your business measure to. You should be able to measure to that too. So sure, you should be able to know incidence rates, but that's not a good, reliable way for us to measure our organization program effectiveness. We have to do that. It's required for the OSHA 300, right? And 300A. We have insurance statistics that we get. Both of those can be manipulated, okay? So what are the other proactive, leading, and lagging, reactive, right? What are the other measurement factors we're going to be using? And does that even mean anything to the people we're giving it to? I used to remember I'd sit down and say, okay, here's our lost time incident rate. Here's our restricted time incident rate, or TRIR. And here's, here's our cost per man hour. And half the people I was talking to, if not more, I'm being conservative with half, wouldn't even understand how to translate an incident rate for lost time of 2.0. What does that mean in real life, right? So put things into terms that people understand and can measure and can show effectiveness from. So what are we measuring? What are we trying to achieve? How do we know we've gotten there? How do we measure that? And then how do we gather that data and present it in a way that's meaningful for people? That's our job. Develop methods to evaluate cost and effectiveness and measure contribution to the organization, process, and operations. And there are so many really good articles, especially through the American Society of Safety Professionals Professional Safety Journal. Really good articles on return on investment for safety. There's so many different types of measurements you can do. There was a great study, the Foster-Wheeler study, if you like to do research, that actually looked at 17 different organizations over 19 years, and they actually correlated safety to productivity rates. Great study, okay, Foster-Wheeler, awesome. So what a great, opportunity to now go back and say, what are the different methods that safety professionals use, and how am I evaluating cost and effectiveness and measuring that and showing that my safety function or my safety department is actually contributing value to the organization, the processes or operations, instead of having to fight that ever persistent, we don't see the results of what you're getting. Because if we're doing our job well, hopefully nothing wrong is happening, correct? But we should, that's not it. We should be able to measure improvements because of what we're doing and be able to quantify and qualify those. So a big challenge from today is to step back and ask yourself, how do I show and evaluate cost and evaluate effectiveness of the things that I'm responsible for and how I'm contributing to value to the organization, and how am I communicating that, okay? So provide results of evaluation, assessments, and recommendation for changes to programs, individuals, or organizations responsible for management and implementation. So again, here I am evaluating and assessing, and I want to be able to communicate my results and give recommendations that are valid and sound in theory and can be backed up with proof points. If I think that maybe we need to make a change to how we are doing our trenching program, and I think we need an internal trenching permit process. Well, what's that based on? Oh, well, I'm making something up here. Over the last 120 days, we've had 16 utility strikes. 8 of those were as a result of not following the one-call protocols and maintaining our markings. 2 of those were a result of improper markings from the utilities, and the rest were a result of not using hand digging. We use mechanical devices instead, okay, something like that. I could then come back and say, and based on this, here I've worked with this learning team of managers, and we've come up with these recommendations to improve our trenching safety by implementing this internal permit process, okay? Or I may come back and say, in terms of an individual, well, I have this one powered industrial truck operator, and he has now been involved in 3 property damage incidents. And here's my recommendation. He's had retraining twice already, and here's the recommendations on what should be done moving forward. And here's the research, here's the basis for that, and going forward from there. Or just again, changes within the organization. You know, how is management responsible and the implementation of the safety into the organization's processes and systems? We would need to be able to provide results of evaluations, assessments, and recommendations, okay? We also are responsible to direct, develop, or help develop management accountability and audit programs to assess the safety performance, and that could be the performance of the entire system, the organization, a certain process or operation. And we want to be able to say, you know, those accountability and audit programs should be positive and give recognition where things are going well. And they should also have deterrence and a mechanism for the management of change when they're not going well. And this could be, for me, I think about this working with human resources where we're actually saying, hey, what's the measurement that we use within our organization to do our roles and responsibilities and job positions actually even contain any of the roles and responsibilities for, let's say, a project manager that we have written in our safety program, but when they were hired, they were given this job description. It didn't say anything about safety. How do we match those up, right? And then how do we measure whether or not and assess whether or not that project manager is fulfilling those requirements? And how is their management assessing all the aspects of it? This is a common issue in organizations where HR has one job description, safety has another job description, and those things don't jive, right? And so safety keeps getting frustrated because the project manager is like, well, I don't think that's part of my job. Your safety, that's your job, because actually that's what their job description said when they were hired. So instead of getting frustrated with the person, let's go back and fix the process, right? And so that's part of our job and our responsibility. Okay, so I mentioned earlier about the phrase safety intelligence, and efficient and effective. This is a profitable process, and this is a SMART process, and SMART is actually an acronym for how we establish our objectives, right? Specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, or relevant, and time-oriented, okay? So safety intelligence is, if you've ever heard of your intelligent quotient, IQ, many people may have taken an IQ test to determine, you know, what is your intelligence capacity, how smart are you? And I've heard it be said, I don't know if I believe this, I haven't done enough research, but I've heard it be said that your IQ is your IQ. You really can't improve your capacity, okay? Doesn't mean you can't improve your test score, but everybody's born with a certain capacity for intelligence, okay? And then there's been in the last, I'm going to say 15 plus years, this emotional intelligence. And there's a really great book on this if you haven't heard of it or taken the test yet. It's kind of interesting. I love those kind of things, where it measures your emotional awareness and sensitivity to others. It's almost like a social sensitivity of, are you interpreting other people's body language and responses in relation to you, and how well do you adjust, and how well are you aware of that? And the good thing for us, they call that EQ now, your emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. And the good thing for us is that we can learn and grow and get better at that. And that's an important factor in being a successful leader, is your EQ. And so we said, well, we think that safety intelligence is something that should be measured and can be grown and developed within people, and that this is an important factor for success in the workplace and success of a leader is, how well am I in tune with, and do I recognize hazards in the workplace? How well can I adjust and actually integrate these safety processes and defenses and controls and methodologies into my management system and my workflow process to help me be successful the first time? I call it safe production, but to be effective, do the job the right way the first time, the safe way, right? So that's your safety intelligence, or your safety quotient, if you will, okay? So as a safety professional, safety intelligence for your organization is actually really important if you just take it based on the principle alone, okay? And so we have processes that we've really taken and plugged into the safety intelligence concept and terminology. And our whole focus is on what we call human capital sustainability. And I'll talk more about that in the next slide. But if you think about, everybody's heard of like environmental sustainability, saving the planet, all these other things, which is very important, okay? But I'm always surprised when we don't hear about, you know, workforce sustainability, human capital sustainability in the same passion and tone that we hear about protecting endangered species or protecting our environment, okay? Our workforce, our people who make our community, who make up our companies, and you know, who are our families and our friends, the preservation of that person and their value that they add to our group, whether it's our family, our friend group, our community group, or our organization group, our work group, that's huge, right? We want to be able to sustain that human capital and keep the team growing and thriving, okay? So our safety intelligence really drives results towards an efficient, effective, profitable, and smart safety management system. That's really the focus of it. So human capital, what is that? In definitions, it can be said that human capital impacts the sum total of the organization's culture, your knowledge, it's what their experience and talent and attitude, the intellectual property, you know, what we come with knowing how to do something, right? And labor resources that are available to an organization or a community. So each person brings with them a culture of how they do the work, the way they do the work, the knowledge of having learned over a lifetime or over a period of time how to do the work. That's their experience. Their talent and skill and ability to do that work, their attitude, which is hopefully positive and safe to be able to do that work, their intellectual property, right? What they hold and know and have gathered over the series of opportunities they've experienced in their unique life experience and what they bring to your organization with that. So human capital, sustaining that is really important. And you think about this, human capital, many organizations value their people. There's no doubt about that, okay? It's just, what are we doing to manage or measure sustaining that human capital? And really, safety is a huge piece of this. So safety intelligence, if you will, emphasizes safety management systems that enhance human capital sustainability, right? So we want to intelligently work within a system that collaborates and is compatible with and completes any gaps in our management's processes and is focused on keeping our people healthy, thriving, and contributing, right? And adding value. That's important, okay? So for the safety professional, what does that mean? That means that this approach to integrating a safety management system into the workflow or operational practices of a business is very vital. We're also looking at how do we integrate this management of safety into culture, the way we do our business, the way we talk. The words we use are so important. I've found this over the last few years. Gosh, I don't even remember what book I got this from, but words matter. Words make a difference. And I just found that by changing some of the words I use, I try not to should on people. It's kind of hard though. You should do this, you should do that. And really trying to turn things around as much as I can to a positive perspective of things. What's it going to help them achieve? What's it going to help them avoid? And really trying to use different words and terms that I found that as I use different words and terms, pretty soon people are listening and they're starting to use the same words and terms. And that's a beginning step to changing or creating culture, right? What are the goals of your organization? As a safety professional, human capital sustainability should be a key aspect of that. I just shoulded. could be a key aspect of that, and something we focus on talking about, and the why behind the what that we're doing. Okay, I hear people say all the time, well, I don't, you should come to work the same way, you should leave work the same way you came, or it should add value to you when you work in the workplace, or nobody wants to see anybody get hurt. All these things are good, but how do we change that message to elevate it a little bit more and a little bit differently? And as a safety professional, that's a challenge for us. How do we change perspective? And how do we integrate these safety management systems into the operational practices, culture, and goals of our organizations, right? We want to drive results towards efficient, effective, profitable, smart management. And really, I've heard folks say, some safety professionals say, I'm just here, my job is safety. It doesn't matter to me if the company makes money. I don't care if I have to shut you down, I'm gonna shut you down. That's just the way it is. Now, you may have to shut someone down based on the unique circumstances and conditions. It's life-threatening, no argument there. But that's not a win in my book, right? As a safety professional, I wanna get ahead. I want to be seen as someone who's adding value, because I actually want to add value. I want to help the company be more effective and efficient and exist and be the best. So I'm going to look at how I can take, and I'm going to inject my process and look and say, okay, if I want this piece of safety, I want HR to take my definitions from the safety program and put those into job descriptions that they use. Let me go talk to the HR manager and see what's next and what resistance or acceptance I get, and how can I solve this problem, right? So that's really focusing on, it is our job for the company to be successful. One of the things I really appreciate about the opportunities I had kind of growing up in my career was I got to be on the executive management team in a very large construction company. And I'm so thankful for the managers I worked with there, and especially for the president, who really taught me that I kind of felt out of place because, well, I'm just a safety person. And they're like, no, you're an executive manager in this company. You need to know this information. You are just as responsible for it as everyone else in the room, just like they're just as responsible for safety as everyone else, as you are, right? And that really helped me a lot to learn more about how businesses work, and to understand how I could take my niche, my specialty, and make sure it was also adding the desired value to the organization, not in a silo, but integrated and spread across all parts and pieces. So I hope that kind of gives you a different perspective. I'm trying to change perspective a little bit, okay? So human capital sustainability, really important that we create a culture where that's the emphasis, that's the focus, and these safety tools that we have in place within our system are valued because they're seen as helping add to the effectiveness and to the efficiency of the organization, right? And really how we get there is through our leadership as a safety professional. Safety professionals are leaders, okay? We're team captains. We are team coaches, however you want to say it, and whatever analogy you want to compare it to, whether it's a sports team or whether it's a club or a family environment, a family group. We are leaders, and leadership and relationship are very important key elements to us being successful. So if you haven't read this book, I love the book, The Leadership Challenge. And out of that Leadership Challenge book, they have the five practices of exemplary leadership. And the first one is model the way. And so we've taken this in our company. We've taken each of these 5 examples, and we've actually given descriptions of what does that look like in our role as safety folks when we're working with clients, we're on a project as the safety officer, or within our own organization to one another. What does that look like? Or even in our own families, okay? So when I model the way, that means a lot of different things. That could mean if our organization requires certain protective equipment when we're out in the work site, I am going to always be sure I have that equipment on and I'm using it the right way. That's an easy way to model the way. But it doesn't stop there. I'm going to model the way in talking about safety in all aspects of my job and integrating that. I'm going to model the way in planning and making sure safety is a planned part of our processes. I'm going to model the way in measuring my team with safety as one of the elements that I consider in terms of are they being successful or not. So just giving some examples. I want to inspire a shared vision, and inspiring people is tricky, right? But inspiring folks means that I touch their heart. And that's number 5 too. But we have a shared vision, we have a shared goal, and we're all working in concert together to achieve that goal. And so I want to encourage them and inspire them and say, you know, this is what I'm creating a vision of where we want to be. I showed you our 2030 vision at the beginning of this slide or this presentation, and our slide for that. And that's our vision for the company. It's a little scary, it's a little big and maybe audacious, but that's our purpose, and we're all inspired to move towards accomplishing that vision because we want to make a difference and a positive impact in our community. We want to establish a legacy, okay? Number 3 is challenge the process. And as safety people, sometimes we're like, nope, the rule says this, X, Y, Z. And there's a principle out there called Bo's Law. And Bo was a NASA astronaut, and he said the number 1 quickest way to get killed on a space mission is to not have standard operating procedures. And then he said the second quickest way to get killed on a space mission is to always follow standard operating procedures. What does that mean? That means we have to have critical thinking. Just because we have a process and somebody wrote that down at some point in time that it applied to a situation at that snapshot in time does not mean that that's going to perfectly fit in all other aspects. And this kind of ties into that human organizational performance, by the way, HOP. But just because I have a rule doesn't mean that rule can't be challenged. Now, we have regulations and laws and we have to follow those, but many of these are performance-based. And so how we get there can change. So what's our process for that? And if it's not working, it makes no sense, and we lose people following us as leaders when we have people do things because that's what the policy says, or that's how we've always done it. Those are false mental models. This is the way we've always done it, so therefore this is the way we will always do it. That's crazy, okay? So challenge the process in a healthy, innovative, progressive way. Number 4, enable others to act, right? Give people authority if you're going to give them accountability, and enable them to act. Help give them the knowledge, give them support. You know, I think the other week we did our class on the role of the authorized, competent, and qualified person, and one of the key things I said was that, you know, we send somebody to a class. Let's pretend it's even a 24-hour class on fall protection at the competent person level, and then we say, well, you went to the class. We didn't verify their knowledge. We had no other OJT or modeling or follow-up points, and we throw them out there, and then they have this fear of threat. If something goes wrong, they're going to be blamed. That's really the perspective. Instead of turning around and saying, well, here's all the responsibilities, here's how you carry out your role, here's some examples of when you would need to stop work, here's some examples of when you may need to, you know, change direction and go back and revise a hazard analysis or whatever else. And I'm going to come out and coach you, and I'm available to you if you have questions. And we're gonna go through this together until you feel like we all feel you're really confident and competent in doing this role. That's helping enabling somebody to act. I'm going to set them up for success, give them the go ahead with it. And then I'm going to encourage the heart. Everybody needs a little encouragement. I had somebody tell me once that the word encourage really means the infilling of courage. You put in, insert into someone courage, okay? And so, you know, how do we do that? Just, you know, going out and listening and being supportive and being a support system for people is important. Recognizing when they're doing good things and the right things. Sometimes if I'm out in the field and I see something that's, you know, non-conforming, incorrect, I try and be careful with how I say things. Like, I don't want to say like you failed or things like that. I think people really react negatively and shut off when they hear some of those words. They can create barriers, right? But, hey, I recognize your effort. And sometimes I'll say, well, that's an A for effort. I can see that you were trying to do the right thing. Now let's talk about what we have going on here and figure out what we can do to get that on track. Okay. So encourage the heart, give recognition, even if it's just a little spark of evidence of something, let's build on that spark. Okay. Connect with people as safety professionals. That's so important. Again, it's about leadership, right? The stronger the relationship and connection between individuals, the more likely someone will want to follow you. Now, I'm also going to say, let's be appropriate. There have been several occasions throughout my career where I'm pretty careful about this. I grew up in the military, so leaders did not fraternize with their subordinates, and so I've always had a hard time of doing the opposite of that. Is building a relationship with my team in an appropriate and healthy manner, maintaining my position as a manager or a supervisor, but also developing relationship and connecting with people in an appropriate way. If we're out in the field as a safety professional and we can be friendly, we absolutely should be friendly, but if our friendship with people prohibits us from carrying out our responsibility, that's a problem. That's a conflict, okay? And so I've been on jobs where I've had very good friends who were working for the company that we were overseeing safety for, or I had one of my best friend's husbands worked on a project, and we were inspecting. I went out there and there was something really wrong. And for a brief moment, I thought, that's my best friend's husband. And then for the next brief moment, I said, yeah, and I want him to go home alive. How would I ever answer to her, if I didn't do something? And so I was real with him. I said, hey man, this situation, we've got a serious issue here. Can we work together to solve it? And really it was up to him how we proceeded from that point, right? But it's how I approach it too. So don't get so close with people or in your relationship of how you work at work that it impacts and affects in a negative way the way you get things done. I've had many people say, why, in fact, a really bad accident I investigated, the supervisor said he didn't say something to the crew because he didn't want them to be mad at him. They wanted them to like him. And we could sit back and say, oh, that's ridiculous. You're the supervisor. You shouldn't do that. That's human nature. We have to recognize that. That's an error in his thought process and how he handled it. But how was he properly equipped to be a supervisor or be a safety professional and be prepared for when you do face that conflict? Because at some point in time you will, right? Or like, oh, nobody likes me. So take a look at how you're doing your job if that's the case, okay? But also, I'd rather be known for being firm, fair, and consistent than for a wishy-washy pushover who really wasn't doing their job. So you have to decide how you want to be seen and walk out and model that to the people that you want to judge you that way, okay? So just be careful. Some leaders think that followers have to take the responsibility to connect, and that couldn't be more opposite. If you're a leader, we need to make our team and our crew feel a part of our tribe, right? And we bring them into the tribe, right? And we treat them with honor and respect and show them the way we operate in this organization or with this crew, or like I said, we call it a tribe in our company. So successful leaders always initiate that, and that's important. Take the first step, make the effort to build a relationship, and if it doesn't go well the first time, don't give up. Give the person the benefit of the doubt. I read a really good book. I'm going to give you guys another really good book. It's called The 4 Agreements, and this totally changed my perspective at how I dealt with other people in terms of getting personally offended and always thinking that somebody was like, oh, they're out to get me. They don't want me to do this. The cold hard reality is I'm not that important. And most people have a lot of other things on their mind. And so it was such a good book in changing my perspective of how I saw things. So I encourage you guys to look up the 4 Agreements if you want. And funny, Christine, you put down a Safety Warriors for sure. This 4 Agreements was talks about the Toltec Indian tribe, and they are warriors of their minds and they control their speech. So I thought that was kind of interesting you said that. So great book if you guys are interested. All right, influence. As safety professionals, we need to have influence. You can't make anybody do anything. Okay, you could force somebody to put on their safety glasses. If you didn't lead them and influence them, the minute you walk away, they're going to take them off. Okay, even if it's because they're just rebellious and nobody's going to tell them what to do. Right, so keep that in mind. We want to have integrity. We want to have good character and good self-discipline, and be very competent in the subject matter and the responsibilities and roles that we carry out. And we want to be responsible to do the right thing, but we can't force others to follow us. I read this in a book, and I'll try and remember the name of the book because I can kind of see the cover, but I can't remember the word of it. But you know, a long time ago, I read this book, and it said that no matter how somebody acts towards you, you need to respond consistently, because that's who you are. Not because they deserve it, but because you're, it was a culture of honor. That was what it was. And it was like, you bring a culture of honor with you, and you give honor to other people in how you lead, because that is who you are and who you want to be, not because somebody else necessarily deserves that. And it's just, again, a switch of perspective of how we react. And why are we talking about this with safety professionals? Because we need to have leadership and influence over people to help them be aware of and listen and even be open to change, right? And so we are key influencers within our organization. You may not have a title or official authority given to you in your role, but you sure can, as a key influencer, be an unofficial leader or an influencer of how people behave because of who you are and how you lead, okay? So there's this I guess, process that we go through when we talk about getting people to change. And, you know, a lot of times people try and use force, you know, physical strength to influence others. Do this, or I'm going to beat you up. I know we don't say that at work, but, you know, just as an example, you know, force doesn't get us very far or very quick, right? We can use intimidation, where we bully or verbally or emotionally get people to act in a certain way against their will. Neither one of these are good processes or should ever be a technique that a safety professional uses, but we should recognize those in the field, because it's possible you may see them in the workplace, right? Someone's trying to get a change in behavior and influence people through non-effective means. Manipulation, it starts to get a little more sophisticated. Now people are coercing other people to act or threatening them, and sometimes it's against their will. Or sometimes I call this the exchange. I hate to even use quid pro quo, because it's this for that, but you do your work in this way, and in exchange, I'll take care of you and give you this, right? I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Not really even a good method for us to use in this aspect, but we're getting better in terms of going down the process here. Persuasion. Now this is good, right? I'm going to use my communication, my verbal skills, and I'm going to help you logically understand and persuade you why what I want you to do, or I'm trying to get you to do, is a good thing, and why you should take action and follow that, okay? And then these last two are the best, okay? Motivation. I want to energize others so that they want to act. I want to communicate to them why this is, and persuading them why this is so good. I'm motivating them that this is how they want to be and aspire to where they want to aspire to, and get them to change and act in that way. And the last way is I change them through honor. I communicate esteem. I help serve them and help them be better. And doing so, I'm inspiring them to act as well. So just some things to think about in terms of what are the different methods and processes, and which ones are we currently using, where you currently act out of to get change, and why. Maybe doing a little bit of thinking about that. And then how do you move in a different direction, and how do you go gain skills or get more information about how to get into the other areas of this, okay? Some of it's just mental for us. So the telltale sign of a great leader is not what they have accomplished on their own, but what they've been able to accomplish through others. And isn't that true with the safety program? I can have the most beautiful written procedure and process manual in the whole world, but if I can't get anyone to open it or follow me putting it in place, I really haven't accomplished much, okay? So our job is to bring other people alongside us. It's not a one-man game. This is a team effort, okay? And this is a group result. So our role and responsibility as a safety professional, understand what your real job is. We just went through the ANSI technical aspects of what outlined the professional role, but what is our real job? It's leadership. It's being good at the technical aspects of our job, but we also have to be able to motivate and lead and organize and manage and communicate, okay? So know your work. I always get a little bit surprised when I interface with someone, let's say another safety professional, we're talking about issues or we're discussing a job, and they have never read what the contract says. And they don't use the specifications, let's say in construction, for example, or they don't know how to read drawings and blueprints. And they're not using the same tools and resources that everybody else on the job uses to know what's next and what's coming up. They don't know how to read a critical path schedule or a schedule in itself, or take that information and plan and project ahead. Know the work, understand the standard operating procedures and how work gets done with your company and with the groups that you're working with, right? And then know what does the law really say? What does your program say? What are your processes, right? Because if you don't know, how is anybody else supposed to know? And if you don't know, how the heck are you following it, right? So this saying, trust but verify, is so true for us. Don't get in the habit of going off the top of your head. We have so much technology that makes resources available to us. I could look something up on my phone in the field. I do that all the time. Or on my iPad, or I could go call somebody, or I could Zoom or FaceTime. I mean, gosh, it's the possibilities and resources to us today versus what we had, shucks, when I started back in the late 80s, early 90s is, 180 degrees opposite, okay? So do what you say you will do and know what that is. You have a contract that your company signed and said that they'd follow. You have submittals that you put in, you have a safety plan, you have a company safety program, you have hazard analysis, we have regulations. There's so many things that we need to know, okay? What are you doing? What are you supposed to be doing? And are you doing it? What are you measuring to, right? So I love this diagram about success. Success is like the tip of the iceberg, and everybody sees, oh, everything's going so well and this is so great. But what's really beneath that and supporting it and holding it up is all the hard work and the persistence and the late night and the rejections or failures and the sacrifices and discipline and criticism and doubts and risks that somebody had to work their way through to keep piling one on top of the other in order to the point where they actually broke the surface and saw success. So don't give up, okay? Our job as a safety professional can be frustrating sometimes, but it is so rewarding when we can actually discover what are we measuring and help other people see how we add value and can help the entire process and project be successful, okay? So what's your area of expertise? What are you competent in or qualified in right now? And what do you want to be competent and qualified in? And again, I talked about safety professionals acting as the competent person. We're really oversight of competent persons in a proper structure, all right? And if you're not in a structure where you're you're still acting as a competent person, you're not providing oversight, what's your strategy to change understanding and behaviors and move in the right direction? If you just go and say, well, I should only be over people, what's your proof points? What's your research? How is it going to add value to the company to shift how they see your position? right? Let's be strategic in how we approach this and complete. What's your own personal training plan? You know, we talk about training programs to educate workers and supervisors, but let's talk about your career for a second as a safety professional. Where are you at right now, and where do you aspire to be? And what are the pieces that you need to fill in, the learning objectives, the key points, the knowledge elements, the core competencies that you need to achieve to get there? On our hidden web page, which I'll show you in a second, I put a couple good articles from Professional Safety Magazine on just model curriculum for occupational safety and health and how to advance the profession. And I think there's little diamonds in there that could trigger some thought process for you folks. Okay, but where do you want to be, and have it, don't just stay where you're at. Okay, that's the status quo. So what are you going to do to get better? It could be a safety subject, it could be a leadership subject, it could be something on your own organizational skills or your communication skills, whatever it is, okay? What's your own personal plan? And then, you know, make sure that you're sure. If you're talking about something and a subject matter and you don't know, go back and check, right? Think before you speak. Stay in your sandbox, stay in your area of competency and where you're at. And if you feel like, you know, that needs to improve, then what are you going to do to improve it, right? And I saw this saying once as well, you know, be a river, not a reservoir. In this, I just had a meeting this morning where I explained this concept where we're talking about getting businesses back to work in a certain industry. And we talked about let's collaborate with other similar businesses through an association that they all belong to, or even just reaching out and as individual organizations and partnering up with other similar businesses to say, hey, you know, what are we going to do to get ourselves back to work through this COVID thing? And that, you know, we should be sharing best practices and ideas. It's the same for safety in general, because that is for the better good of the whole, right? During the meeting, Nalani also mentioned she had read this saying where, and I'll use it as Lawson as an example, no one person at Lawson is smarter than everyone at Lawson. So no one safety professional is smarter than all safety professionals together. Does that make sense? Or no one person in your company or your department or your crew is smarter than all of our heads put together. Get the idea, right? So share information, be talking about these things. Don't just hold it to yourself, right? We're talking about safety elements that are ethical elements, okay? So organization, as safety professionals, I want to challenge you to think about how you organize yourself in your day. I know we talk a lot every day to other groups and other companies or crews about, well, you should plan your work. And well, what do you know, how do you not know what's coming up next? Or, you know, how do you not have all the right tools or whatever it is? But how about us? What's our safety management schedule? What are we going to accomplish today, this week, this month? What are the critical activities in integration and association with what's going on the job site? Maybe there's certain audits or trainings or follow-ups that need to be made. I use my Outlook calendar very heavily. In our company, we use a program called Monday.com. We've actually gone through and are in the middle of remapping all of our processes and our policies and procedures. And this is important. What is your management system? What is your mean and method on how you do your job? Okay. So how do you know what's going on today on the job site? Do you read the schedule? Do you plan your day around the critical activities of what work is going on? Are you looking ahead and saying, oh, wow, you know, in a month, this new contractor is going to come on and they're going to start erecting steel. What do I know about steel erection? What do I need from them? What do my supervisors need to know about steel erection? And what do we need to do to make sure that we're prepared for them to come out here, right? That's a good example of that. And then your management system. Like I said, what's your mean and method? How do you do your work? What's your best practice of how you accomplish your job, or what's your process? Do you have a little written plan or a process or a program? What are your goals and how you want to achieve them for you and your role on this project or within this company or within this program? And then how are you going to manage change? right? And how are you going to capture lessons learned and kind of put that back together to the benefit of yourself and your system? Being prepared. Management, collaboration, and strategy. Who are you focusing most of your time and efforts on? I've said this for years, that if I only had a limited budget for training, I would do all my training with supervisors and managers, because then whatever we trickle down, they should be able to help support and facilitate out in the workplace, right? Be proactive. Don't wait for managers and supervisors to come to you and say, oh, in a week, we're going to be starting XYZ. They've got a lot of other things on your mind. Teach them and be in the forefront and be visible, right? That say, hey, what do you got coming up next week? I see on the schedule, it says you're going to be doing this. Are you putting up a scaffold? How are you going to get up there? What can I help you with? What do we need to put in place for this, right? And start working with them in that kind of collaborative manner. You're going to be surprised at the information that comes your way, because they want you to help them stay ahead. And don't you want that too? So you can get the results that we need. If we see on the schedule, we're not reading the schedule, and we miss that in a month steel erection starts, I just missed 30 days of time that I had to do training, to work on hazard analysis, to collaborate with that company, to collaborate with my management team. So when they put boots on the ground that day that they're supposed to start, we're ready to safely produce, okay? And it's easier to adjust to 10 to 30% of, last minute unanticipated changes, because they will happen, right? Than it is to have the whole 100% that needs to be dealt with. And now safety's wanting to stop everything because nobody told them this or that. Well, our job is to know this or that and use the same tools as everybody else. So be proactive. What's your strategy to involve management and employees in a meaningful way? Lots of good discussion could be had on this. And, this isn't the safety professional show. This is the safety management system of the organization that helps us be successful and effective and efficient as a whole. And so how do we bring everybody in alignment with that and take away the barriers and take away the potential for stop work, because we've dealt with that in advance, right? Make sure that you present yourself in a way that you are seen as part of management, and then management will see you as part of the team. How you act, how you dress, how you deal with situations, how well you manage yourself and your work, how educated you are on the subject. It doesn't mean you have to have a college degree, but how well do you go out and research, and do you know your stuff, okay? If you want to be an effective safety professional, people need to see you as a leader and a manager, and you need to see yourself that way first and start walking out that role. It starts today. If you don't see yourself that way, find a mentor, do some studying and research, find somebody that you say, I think they are a really good leader. It doesn't even have to be a safety professional. I like that manager. What do they do right now that I'm not doing? And let me start modeling after that and following what they do, and see if that changes how people view you, okay? And it takes time, but become a key influencer. Be the person who says, hey, hold on, we need to get Tracy's opinion on this before we do anything further. She'll have a good answer. I was tickled yesterday. I got an email from somebody I haven't worked with in, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years. And they said, hey, I have this issue, and this may not even be a safety issue, but I thought of you right away. And I thought you may be able to give me some advice or point me in the right direction. And then they told me what the issue was. So I responded right away, and I said, oh, it's so good to hear from you. Thank you. And I asked a couple questions for some additional information so I could give them some good advice, right? And make sure that I was staying in my sandbox, but I wanted to understand the circumstance appropriately. So be a key influencer, right? That somebody thinks of as somebody who knows how to solve problems, or who can get the right answer, or who's connected, or who can have influence. That's where we want to find ourselves. And we want to enable people, not disable them. And so really step back. I hope you'll kind of soak on this for a little bit after we're done with this class today, is really think, am I an enabler, or am I a disabler in how I'm doing my job? That's something that I have to check myself on all the time, because I feel like in safety, sometimes it's a lot of, well, this is wrong, fix it. And so sometimes that's going out and saying, good effort, here's how can we enable ourselves to keep going and fix this issue, right? So be an enabler, not a disabler. Just anybody can point out and say, this is wrong, sorry, stop, figure it out yourself. wow, who wants to hire that person? You know, let's be problem solvers and connectors and fixers, right? Planning, know your job, know the job, know what the critical path items are for safety and for the work. Make sure they're on your schedule and that they are on your radar and that they're important and you're paying attention to them. And know your documents. Know how you're actually supposed to fill out a hazard analysis, what's the purpose behind it, and what are some of the best practices and techniques, and start really working on making those relevant and usable tools. Same thing with your site-specific plans. Know what you said, know what you need to do. Get team input and collaboration. These learning teams are something that's really critical and important. Yeah, somebody just wrote in, Christine said that never complain about something without providing at least one solution. That's so true. That's so true. Let's be problem solvers. You know, follow up, that's important. Always follow up and listen to the feedback loops in the field. When people are whispering and you're hearing certain things, address them and deal with them. Do what you said you would do. And it's about effectiveness, it's about efficiency, it's about doing the job the right way the first time. That's actually how we make money in construction, is doing the job the right way the first time and doing it once, right? So this is a hierarchy of controls. This comes from the ANSI Z10 standard, Occupational Health and Safety Management Systems, great standard. One of my foundational standards. In fact, I have a copy on my desk. I look at it almost every day just to kind of keep on track and to challenge my thought processes of how I'm approaching issues or subjects. It's a good reference. And so we know this is in federal law in OSHA. This is in the state of Hawaii, in two places, in fact, in the construction and the general industry regulation. It's not going to say hierarchy of controls, but the engineering controls and risk mitigation paragraphs talk about this. And it's also in EM 385 if you do military work, and they're probably one of the only ones that actually say hierarchy of controls. So this is just anytime we have a risk as a safety professional, we need to use this order of precedence in determining what method or combination of methods we're going to use to minimize or eliminate the hazards to as low as reasonably achievable. Okay, and so number one, do I have to do the work this way? If not, can I eliminate it? Great. You'd be surprised how many times we don't have to do the work that creates a hazard and we can do it a different way. Substitution, this is great when we have like a less hazardous material we could use. Engineering controls, I talked about that earlier. It could be a water integration system, a ventilation system. It could be circuit breakers, railings, warnings. These could be signs, alarms, labels. Administrative controls could be our procedures or our training that we follow. And then our last option is personal protective equipment. So if I have an impalement hazard in the workplace, instead of just going to capping it off right away, which is what a learned behavior from us, I challenge you to think through every time when you have a risk, think through this decision-making process to make sure we're not missing other opportunities at how we could actually, from a technical standpoint, resolve the exposure, okay? Technical accuracy, I am a big proponent of being very technical. Our job is a subset of engineering, and in a lot of cases we're working in construction and facilities and technical subjects. And so I in particular believe that there's a difference between audits and surveillance. Audits are planned out, line by line, process step by process step evaluation of, are we in conformance with something, right? Surveillance is a snapshot in time based on my level of observation and knowledge and timing, right, of what I saw for the day. And there's a big difference between the two, and both need to be done. So if you're not scheduling audits, you know, that's something you could put into your tool bag of tricks to make sure that you are in conformance with what's required by law, which is the minimum, and that you're actually doing what you said you would do, right? Take a policy, take a procedure, and go back and find out, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? If not, why? Maybe the process needs to change. Maybe we need to address some feedback loops in the field or some old mental models of, well, this is how we've always done it. We can't follow it this way, right? How many people have heard somebody say, well, I know that's what our program says, but this is how we do it, okay? So, regulatory reviews, know the Federal Register, great document. If you're having trouble sleeping, that could help too, but great, it gives you the basis for the regulation. Letters of interpretation, scientific or white papers, and consensus standards. We should be looking at all of these to know our subject matter in depth, and then doing research, manufacturers literature and studies and information, in other industry literature that is coming out through like the American Society of Safety Professionals, or other best practices that may be put out through associations or groups, and then be good at our documentation, right? Recording things in a factual matter, and recording things to be able to show our proof points. And then just getting a couple more slides here, and we'll start to wrap up for the presentation. But you know, plan ahead for your own training and your own professional development. This could be formal training, which may be web-based, it may be virtual, which we're doing a lot more of now, or this could be through an actual classroom or self-study programs. ASSP has some great self-study programs and virtual programs that they're running as well. Our company is going to be on a web-based process here pretty soon, and we're doing these virtual classes. There's lots of really good resources out there. So establish a training program for yourself. I know in our company, we tell our staff, you know, what do you want to accomplish by the end of the year? I put out a list of courses. Who wants to attend which course, and what are you going to do? And be realistic about what you can achieve and commit to. So make sure that the training is relevant. Make sure it's challenging and has sound fundamentals, and whoever's presenting it for you. Make sure it's accurate. And then how are you going to then challenge yourself to take that information and put it into action, right? That's the second part of this. I also want you to just remind everybody of the Code of Ethics. This can be, you can get this from the Board of Certified Safety Professionals website. These are all the different certifications that they give. We're going to do a real quick overview in a second, and talk about you know, what are the different elements that are needed educational work experience wise to get these certifications and the value of that. But it's really important that we hold ourselves to a standard of behavior, and our professional standard, and that everybody really take this seriously, right? We want to advance the integrity and honor and prestige of being a safety professional. We want to elevate that. This is not a second-class citizen position. This is actually a very, should be a very respected and honored role and position that we fill. And we should carry it out in a manner that's worthy of getting respect and giving respect, right? But there is a code of ethics of how we should conduct ourselves, and especially if you're certified through the BCSP, you're held to this, so that safety and health of people is paramount, and that we need to be honest and fair and impartial and act with responsibility and integrity. We should only issue public statements, that means speaking in public, right? That are in an objective and truthful manner, founded on knowledge and facts and competence in the subject matter. We only undertake assignments that we're qualified to do. We avoid deceptive acts and falsifying or misrepresenting our knowledge or qualifications. We conduct ourselves in our professional relations by the highest standards of integrity, and we don't put ourselves in compromising positions or positions that are conflicts of interest. We act in a manner that's free of bias. We don't care what religion, ethnicity, gender, age, national origin, sexual orientation, or disability somebody has. And we seek opportunities to be constructive and to be of service in our community and in the advancement of our career and our organizations. Okay, so just kind of summarizing a little bit, that's important that we know that. Here's some of the different certifications that you can achieve through the BCSP. I know there's other, I belong to the World Safety Organization also. I'm a certified safety executive through there. I think that's a great organization. National Safety Council, and there's some other groups that give certifications, but I tend to lean towards the BCSP first because they're accredited and they're a great organization. So I'm not saying they're the only ones. I'm just happens to be the one that I personally have high esteem for. So the highest certification that can be achieved is a certified safety professional. They used to actually give specialties in this. I think I have the construction one. They don't issue those anymore. But there's a general practices, the CSP and general practices. You have to have at least a bachelor's degree in any field and 4 years of experience with at least 50% of that work being safety related. There's the safety management specialists. This is great also. There are no educational requirements, but in this particular exam, you have to have at least 10 years of safety management related experience with at least 35% of your tasks related to safety related elements. There's the ASP, which is the first half of the CSP. You must have your ASP to get your CSP, but you can now just hold the ASP. So it's a minimum of a bachelor's degree in any field, or now an associate's degree in safety and health or environmental. And your associate's degree has to include at least 4 courses with at least 12 semester hours of study in safety and health and at least 1 year of experience. The GSP isn't actually a certification or certificate. It's just a placeholder and an indicator that you've achieved and completed a bachelor's or master's degree in a qualified program, and you are intending to achieve your CSP within the eligibility timeframe. And TSP could be for somebody, let's say Canadian registered safety professionals want to come work here in the United States. They can have a placeholder or a credential equivalent for their CRSP. They're transitioning here to the CSP, and the same thing as the GSP, you have to get your CSP within the required time frame. And then we have some other certifications, the OHST, again, no minimum training requirements for this, or the CHST, you just have to have 3 years experience. So occupational health, occupational hygiene and safety technician is really more towards the health and environmental aspects, where the CHST really focuses on construction. We have the safety trained supervisor and the safety trained supervisor in construction. So 30 hours of safety and health in both of these, and this is really at the foreman supervisory level. And then there's the CIT, and you have to have at least 135 documented hours of teaching, training, and developing safety and health programs to be a certified instructional trainer. So these are great goals. Just because you have these doesn't mean you know everything and that you're perfect and wonderful. I'm sure you're wonderful because you achieve them. But it's an indicator of a level of knowledge and commitment that you've put into your career. And they're recognized. These are nationally recognized and accredited certifications. And so I encourage you, if you haven't done so, to really go back and think about where do you want to be, where do you want to get to, and how you're going to do that, right? And so I also, last piece here is to just really talk about professional organizations. I think that it's important to surround yourself with other professionals who can help grow your career. I've always heard and read that you should surround yourself with the 5 smartest people that you can find who are smarter than you, right? And then iron sharpens iron, right? How they think and talk influences how you think and talk. So there's that rule of 5 is what that's called. And if you look around and the 5 people you are professionally associating with the most are not helping you move or progress, doesn't mean you can't be friends with them anymore, but maybe you want to expand your circle of influence, okay? And a great way to do that is to join like the local Hawaii chapter for the American Society of Safety Professionals. You could join the National Safety Council. I mentioned the World Safety Organization earlier. There's the National Association of Safety Professionals. There are great trade association groups that have safety committees here. In the construction industry, I'd say the GCA is the strongest. There are other groups that I've listed here. I'm not going to read through each one, but go out there and find peers and groups within your community that will help challenge you and support you, and that you can really use as a networking resource. That's very critical to a successful career path. So value excellence. Be the repeater in chief, and that means just because you said it once, you should expect to repeat your messages over and over and over and over again, okay? Just because you've heard it 1,000 times doesn't mean your audience has. And you know, what do we say? Repetition creates, you know, practice makes perfect, repetition creates good habit. And so part of our job as a safety professional is to be the repeater in chief. We're the one who's going to keep sending that message. What is our message to management? pretty soon we'll hear them start to use the same words if we have the right level of influence in how we carry ourselves, right? And be the repeater in chief to the workforce. And pretty soon they're going to know what you would say or what's expected or how we do work, okay? You can have great influence with just your words. And pay attention to details. Cross your T's, dot your I's, know your proof points, do your research and have a basis for your opinions and your reports. Display integrity and sound ethics in a crisis that really is telling on how we would act. And so, you know, think through things. What would I do if, and how would I respond? And have, you know, what I call your buy time statements or your elevator speeches of, you know, hey, if I saw somebody up not tied off 40 feet off the ground, what would I do? And kind of think through those role plays. So when something is presented to you of that level of urgency, that you know how to respond well because you've played it through in your mind, okay? Show genuine respect for others, not necessarily because they deserve it, but because you're respectful and you're honorable, and that's how you're going to treat everyone, okay? You reap what you sow, you get what you put out, okay? And go the second mile, give the extra effort. Safety profession is not one to just go through the motions. The decisions we make and the way we do our job has an impact directly on people's lives, the quality of their lives, and the success of our organizations. And seeing ourselves as being that vital and important is the first step, right? And then demonstrate consistency. It doesn't matter who you're speaking to, what role they're in, who they are, what the circumstances are. We need to be consistent, firm, fair, and consistent, okay? And then I encourage you to never stop learning. Challenge yourself. Just because you went through a class once, go find a different class. Go learn more about the subject. Go dig into it and find a certain, dig into a certain aspect of it that was confusing to you or you thought you knew. Go make sure that you still remembered it or that you were right. So the most dangerous person is the person who says they know it all. That's impossible. Our lives and our workplaces and our industries are dynamic, and that means we're always going to be learning. Okay. So I'll take a second. I see we have a couple questions here on the question and answer. First one said, what's a good approach to getting the old timers to put on safety glasses and keep them on, especially if you're younger than them? I think the first thing is to not see yourself as younger than them and not to see them as old timers. I think we always need to be respectful of people who've been in the trades for a long time, and we can even learn from them. But I think how we respectfully approach them and support the reason that you think that they should wear these and have proof points and be able to have clear, concise talking points that says, hey, listen, why aren't you wearing your glasses? Is there a reason? What's preventing you from doing so? And listen, there's some feedback that maybe we need to address a circumstance and fix something. And then giving them some, not just going up and, giving them our soapbox dissertation on why safety glasses are important. But the first thing we should do is ask, is there a reason why you're not wearing these? And then try and address it from there. And then be prepared with your proof points if they do want to discuss it. And, at the end of the day, if you still can't get through to them, the cold hard reality is maybe that's the requirement of your company or the law requires it. And at the end of the day, I usually I try and start off with saying, I really could use your help then. We've talked about all these things. There's really not a good reason. I want to make sure that you understand that this is a requirement. My job is to make sure that, everybody's safe and we're following the requirements. So, here's what's going to happen next. I've tried to convince you. I hope that you'll just think about it a little bit, and that I'd appreciate you putting your glasses on now so we can move on. And that if I come back and you're not wearing again, you can be sure that these are the steps that this is what's going to happen. And then I'd go to their supervisor on the side privately and say, hey, listen, this is the discussion I've had with this person. I really need your help in getting them to wear their glasses, because really the supervisor's just as responsible, if not more, than you are, and try and work those angles. And I hope that helps put you in the right direction. So let's see, another person wrote and said, when we talk about safety, site supervisor and project managers working together in a safety culture that isn't very well developed or strong, do you have a few small tips to obtaining management buy-in? I think so, yeah. I think helping the managers see you as an asset and a value to their success and their progression. And so really being strategic and sitting back and saying, what are the things I can do to show them that I can help improve efficiency and effectiveness, and including you in the discussion. So I'd pick a couple elements that, try and research and figure out from them and talk to them, and what is the barrier to why you're not working well together. I had a superintendent one time who was, oh, he's a salty old sea dog, and I had the hardest time getting him to cooperate with me, and we were just head-to-head battle. And finally one day I said, hey, can I ask you a question? He's like, yeah. I said, is there something personal about me? We seem to always be fighting, and I don't know about you, but it's exhausting. I feel like I'm trying to help you, and I feel like you don't want my help. And we had a really good discussion where he just said, I've always had a negative experience with safety people, and I just put you in that same bucket. And I feel like you're trying to slow me down and make me fail. And, I get what you're saying, but how you're approaching it, I don't see how it's going to help me. And so we really just sat and talked through and worked through things, and one issue at a time. We just came to a different way of doing it. And really, isn't that making sure that we're integrating into their system the things that need to be done? And so I found that if I'd go talk to him on the side, and I had to find the right time of day that was best for him, and we talked about that too, that I could discuss some of the challenges I was seeing, and we could work on coming up with a solution together that could help him actually become more efficient and effective. And later on in my career, I was so honored when I saw him out on another job site, and he said, I learned so much from you. And I said, well, I learned a ton from you. And he said that basically he realized that he needed to work with me, because I was actually going to be the one who took care of him if something went wrong, and was trying to actually take care of him to prevent things from going wrong. And so sometimes it's just getting down to the, how supervision has interacted with other safety people, or what they understand our role to be, and how savvy and strategic can we be in relationship building and communicating the value we can add to other people if they'll just let us work with them. And that's just kind of where I'm at with my headspace there. And then the next question says, in the construction industry, many of the workers are male. What are some tips for handling men stepping outside of professional boundaries? What if they ask you on a date without waving flags or taking a complaint to the next level? I don't know. I must not be putting out the right signals. I don't think I've ever been asked out on a date. I think I'm too scary, but all jokes aside, it's a serious issue. I think first how we see ourselves and how we handle ourselves. And if somebody's making a pass at you or acting in an inappropriate way, I would just pull them over on the side and say, hey, listen, I'm not sure if I'm picking up the signal the right way, but it seems like, you're interested in me on a social level, and I'm here for work only. And so thank you, but I'd appreciate it if we could just keep our conversations professional. And if you do that privately, it tends to not challenge them more, where they feel like, they're going to have to act a certain way to save face. And to be honest, if it doesn't get better, then and it continues to be inappropriate, I think that you need to say something to someone else. It needs to be reported. But I would just really quickly just be like, hey, you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm not interested, or I prefer to keep our relationship very professional. I don't date people I work with. Thank you, but no thank you. And I would just move on. Don't feel bad. Don't, you're not the one who started it, I hope. And, it's not anything that typically you've done wrong. Try and see it as an opportunity to nip it in the bud when it's a small issue before it becomes out of control. That would be my best advice for that. Okay, let me go through the chats. Anybody else have any questions or anything else? What questions do you have? What can I help answer? I hope this was helpful for you in, stepping back and looking at the safety profession from a different perspective, and really challenging you and encouraging you and motivating you to look at your career path and growth, or even look at how you look at safety professionals within your own organization, and being able to use that role in the most effective and efficient way possible. So last thing, I'm going to share my screen with our website. This screen here, hopefully everybody can see my 2-hour course here. This is lawsonsafety.com/being a safety professional. This has the information. The recording from today will be up within about 24 hours. but you can download the handout, the at-a-glance certifications from the BCSP and the Code of Ethics. There's a couple good articles on curriculum and advancing the profession. And then most importantly, your safety pivot, opening this up and filling it out. I like to fill it out and then make a calendar appointment 30 days from today, attach that document in an email to myself. I can attach it in my Outlook, and in 30 days, I open it up and say, wow, how did I do accomplishing the things I challenged myself to do within the next 30 days? So that's really the purpose of that. Okay, thank you everybody for taking the time to join us to talk about the safety profession, and have a good rest of your day and a safe week. Thank you.